Without the freedom to offend, there is no free speech. It's the David Knight Show.
Zero Hedge has an article, Media's Racial Injustice Blind Spot. Over 30 shot in another deadly Chicago weekend. And, of course, Memorial Day weekend, over 50 people were shot in Chicago, while the mayor's preoccupation was in shutting down churches. And you had the police department typically trying to cite businesses that were open, close down churches, because they know that that's not a dangerous thing for them to do. I mean, the government has every incentive. The police, from the police all the way up to City Hall. City Hall wants the money. The police don't want to get involved in a violent confrontation. They don't want to go out and confront these drug gangs that they've created with a war on drugs. They don't want to create them. They could get killed. And so other people are going to get killed doing that. No. They'll go for the low-hanging fruit. They'll go to the small businesses. They'll go to the churches. They'll find them. They'll shut them down. They'll harass those people. While you have 30 people, again, this weekend. 3 people dead. At least 28 others have been injured by shootings across Chicago. And as you look at this, the blind spot, this is what is not being talked about by the mainstream media, of course, because they've got a different narrative. And they have a sacred religion. It is the New Age religion, the cult of Black Lives Matter, quite frankly. And as they point out in the Zero Hedge article, they also call it a religion. They say they have sacred dogmas. For example, the first tenet, the first commandment of the Black Lives Matter religion is that black oppression is everywhere. One man did explore that in a viral tweet. They report, he said, I'll lose many friends over what I'm about to say, but I will possibly be called a racist, even a white supremacist, even though I'm a brown man who's been beaten to a pulp by neo-Nazis wearing steel-toed boots. But maybe, just maybe, the fact that I'm getting 100% of my information from the black scholars in the picture, Thomas Sowell, Glenn Lowry, Shelby Steele, John McWhorter, and he goes on to list a whole bunch of people. I read for you on Friday what Walter Williams had to say. But he said, I still can't stop myself. Number one, black lives don't matter. Black Lives Matter don't care about black people. He said, here's the evidence. Name a single time, just once, when they protested against black people being killed by other black people. Like, in Chicago, 50 a week. Can you imagine if you had 50 black people a week being killed by the police in Chicago instead of by other black people? Do they protest that in Chicago, in America, anywhere in America? No. And he says the biggest cause of death for black men aged 15 to 45 in the U.S. is other black men. Compare that to white people. The biggest killer is traffic accidents for the younger portion and heart attacks for those over 35. What about black lives in Sudan, East Timor, or Libya? Do they care about that? No. They don't get out and protest unending wars that were continued and escalated by Obama. They don't protest the persecution of black Christians in Muslim countries. No, they don't protest any of that. Do black lives matter to them then? Speaking of which, he said, imagine if white people started doing the reverse. Imagine every time a white person was killed by a black person, there'd be protests, riots, looting, social media campaigns. It would be more frequent because African Americans kill more white people in the U.S. than white people kill African Americans. So now what do we do, he says. Then there's the police killings. What happened to George Floyd is visceral. And as I've said before, and as he says, no one can honestly defend the officer. It was excessive use of force. But he said the only reason people are up in arms about this is because social media and the mainstream media focus the attention disproportionately on these incidents when the victim is black and the officer isn't. And that's exactly what I tried to do before this all erupted. I knew this was going to be used this way, and we continue to let them manipulate society, and they have absolute authority and power to do that, don't they? Welcome back. I was talking about the Zero Hedge article written by a black man, talking about the blind spot that the media has. It's not a blind spot. It's a bias. We're being manipulated in all of this. And part of what he was talking about, and it was what I spent a long time, I said, all right, let's just take a look. I know how they're going to use this horrific situation with George Floyd. And again, I don't agree with the approach taken by many on the right to try to demonize him. He's not a saint. He's not a demon. He's somebody who has a criminal background. He hadn't been involved in any issues after he moved out of Houston, was living in Minneapolis for a while. He may have passed a counterfeit bill, and he should have been arrested. He should not have been killed. And that's the issue. But why did they pick that particular case? Well, he says, you may have heard of Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old black boy who was murdered while brandishing a toy gun. That was a horrific case. I've covered that. I mean, he's out there basically, it was like a Christmas Story, you know, Ralphie with his BB gun. Except I don't even think he had a BB gun. I think it was just a toy gun. You know, pew, 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 you know, shooting whatever. Somebody called the police. 12 years old. The cops drive up. The car doesn't even stop. The guy jumps out of the car and shoots him. But he goes, how many of you have heard of Daniel Shaver, a white man who was showing his friends a scoped air rifle used to exterminate birds that entered his store? And he was killed for that. Or Sam DuBose, the black man who was shot dead for driving his car away from the police. The exact same thing happened before that to Andrew Thomas, a white man driving away from the police. But none of you heard about that. Alton Sterling was a black man shot dead by the police when reaching into his pocket for his wallet. And that was a travesty. But the same thing happened to a white guy named Dylan Noble. Sterling made national headlines. None of us heard a word about Noble. And he points out you haven't heard about any of the white cases, but you've heard about Alton Sterling, you heard about Philando Castile and so forth, because the only time police killings make the news is when the victim is black and the officer isn't. I also showed you the heinous situation with a large black police officer and a small boy, and he's choking the boy. The boy is black. It's black on black, but nobody paid any attention to that. And he says in 2019, 49 unarmed people were killed by the police. 9 of them were black. 19 were white. And so why are we not focusing on reforming the police? Why are we, even when you look at the efforts to defund the police, it's all about racism. They make it about race because they're not looking at a way to stop the excessive use of force. The Democrats have been all about the excessive use of force. The Democrats have been all about the excessive use of government, and government is force. And ultimately, when push comes to shove, this is what you're going to wind up with. And the first thing that you could do would be to remove a lot of the unnecessary confrontations that are created by unnecessary laws and by the war on drugs. But there's other things that you could do as well. But anyway, he talks further deconstructing this. It's all about racism narrative. He points out, if the police are systematically anti-black, explain how it's possible that 20% of the police force in America is black, when African Americans constitute roughly 14% of the population. They're actually overrepresented in the police force. And why haven't any of them, as he points out, gone on 60 Minutes and said, we're being trained to be racist? They haven't. He said, look at the 2 worst cities in America to be black in, Baltimore and Chicago. Those are places where the people in power are black. And the people in power being black, it's worse for the African-American community in Chicago and Baltimore than in cities that are not run by black politicians, that are not run by Democrats. And I talked about at the beginning of the broadcast how Baltimore is now looking to put in somebody who was kicked out for embezzlement a couple of years ago. She's now the front runner in a group of 20 Democrats. And of course, they're only going to vote for Democrats in Baltimore. And she's going to be replacing the current mayor. And this current mayor is going to be going to jail for 3 years for her crimes. It's simply corruption. And let me tell you, the way that you get corrupt politicians in office is when people don't care about what they actually do or who they are. They're playing identity politics. They're going to support them because they're Democrat. They're going to support them because they're black. They're going to support them because they're female. And they don't care about their criminal record. That's quite evident with what's going on in both Chicago and in Baltimore. They don't care. And that's why I said we cannot be that way. We cannot be that way about President Trump. We have to hold him responsible for what he's done to this country with the lockdown, with the red flag gun laws, with the Operation Warp Speed vaccines. We don't give him a pass because he's a Republican, just like these people should not give a corrupt criminal a pass because she's female or because she's black or both. You play that kind of identity politics, you start attaching yourself to a person, to a party, and that's how you go down the drains. You have to focus on principles, and the most important principle is liberty, because everything is underneath that. We've been told the most important thing for government to do is to keep us safe. How are they doing? What a laughable joke. What a laughable joke. They can't keep us safe. No matter how repressive and authoritarian and brutal they are, they cannot keep us safe. And everybody who thinks, we got this, you pick your side. You're on the side of the protesters or the police. Don't look at it that way. If you look at it that way, we're all going to lose. You have to refocus. You have to understand that the principles that are involved here, you want an honest government, you want a peaceful government, you want a government that's going to let you pursue happiness, not lock you down, not impose curfews, not impose arbitrary fines and laws and citations on you, and then send out police to confront you, and then tell them that no matter what they do, they will be protected. Because you've got immunity laws, because you've got unions and so forth. So just, you go out, you get that money. I mean, we've seen how this works in New York City and so forth. Adrian Schoolcraft, how they said, just go out on a Halloween, just get the people in and we'll figure out what we'll charge them with later on. Just bring them in. Don't bother to write them up or charge them. We'll just make up something later. He got that on tape. That's New York City. You think that's the only place that happens? At no point in human history has any two groups of people had the same level of wealth or income as the other. It would be absolute miracle to expect that people with different backgrounds, cultures, histories, values, ethics to have the same level of wealth. So you want to talk about disparity of wealth? As you've been educated or miseducated or propagandized or brainwashed, turned into useful idiots by your college professors? All about disparity? No, it's not. As a matter of fact, you want to talk about disparity. Why is there such a disparity between North and South Korea? Why was there such disparity between East and West Germany? The people were the same. Their backgrounds, their cultures, their histories, their values, their ethics, their abilities. But look at the freedom in the two cities, in the two different experiments. And if they had freedom, then they could create wealth. But if you don't have freedom, you can't create wealth, you can't have peace, you can't have anything. That is the core value. If you make anything else the core value. And that's what they're trying to do. This racism narrative is simply an agenda for a civil war. And they're doing a pretty good job because everybody is intimidated about confronting it. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hey guys, Rob Dew here with InfoWarsStore.com, and I want to tell you about something that I think has really helped me out, and I think can help you out too, especially if you have any problems sleeping, and that's Knockout. Let's face it, our life patterns have been disrupted by this lockdown, this government-imposed imprisonment, and it has definitely affected my sleep schedule. But one thing that has helped is Knockout. I take one pill about an hour before I want to go to bed, and boom, I get a great night's sleep. And just this past Memorial Day, I took 2 of them, fell asleep about 1 a.m., woke up at 8 a.m., ready to go. It really has made a difference in my life, and it can make a difference in your life too. If you don't get any sleep, you're going to be a grouch. If you get great sleep, you're going to be on point. You're going to be mentally focused. You're going to be ready to take on the day. And right now, Knockout is 50% off. It's less than $15 a bottle. You get 30 capsules. Give it a try today. It's at a great price right now, and it can really help you get the sleep you need, especially in these tough times. It's Knockout, and it's available at InfoWarsStore.com.